Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Micah, and today I'm just chilling and playing some Oblivion. I'm kind of taking in the beauty of the scenery. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get this overwhelming urge to boot up Oblivion and just enjoy the world for a while. I don't get the long-term satisfaction from it that I do from, well, hey there, buddy. My aim is terrible. I don't get the long-term satisfaction from it that I do with Daggerfall, so I don't exactly, replay it on repeat, but I still find myself coming back to Oblivion. It's the game that got me into role-playing games, role-playing in general, and I just find the music and the atmosphere exceedingly comfort. This might just be nostalgic, but also, I just think this is probably the best video game soundtrack of all time. This is highly subjective, obviously, but find myself returning to the soundtrack whenever I'm reading or whenever I was a teacher. I would play it in the background in the classroom, stuff like that. Anyway, I've been thinking lately about the nature of role-playing games, and in particular about the role the character sheets play in role-playing games. Almost any RPG out there has a character sheet that helps to represent. It's like a bridge between the player and the game world. And so to analyze the character sheet a little bit, let's first talk about what role-playing games are. Role-playing games are kind of like, oh no, it's a will-o'-the-wisp. I could just die right here. Role-playing games are like interactive fiction, right? Well, what is fiction? A piece of fiction is kind of like an author who's asking a hypothetical question to the reader. In many fantasy fiction books and stories in particular, there's a hypothetical world or hypothetical circumstances in the world. For example, Narnia is ostensibly a real-world book whenever you first start reading it, but then suddenly they end up in an otherworldly place. So C.S. Lewis is kind of hypothetically asking the reader, like, what would happen if a child were to wander into this icy world that's been, overthrown by this evil ass witch. Oh, look at this. We have a pilgrim who's praying at the shrine. So by asking these hypothetical questions about hypothetical circumstances, the writer of fiction sort of aims to either, if they're writing just for fun, they're going to. What is she? Oh, she's fighting the will-o'-the-wisp? Okay, we gotta try to help her then. Arrow of Silence, that could help. Okay, this is actually kind of serious. Oh, she has a totem staff. I'm severely scared of these things. Oh gosh, I hit this civvy. Ma'am, can you just run away? I think I'm just gonna run away. I suggest you do the same thing. Okay. Yeah, by asking these hypothetical questions about hypothetical worlds and situations, the author and the reader embark on this question that usually discusses the human condition or the human condition as it pertains to society at large, or if nothing else, the hypothetical situations bring amusement or excitement to the reader, which is usually the camp I fall into as I seek to attain those higher forms of fiction whenever I write, but maybe that sort of thing just comes with time. So if fiction is the author asking the hypothetical questions, then role-playing games are a more interactive version of this, where the dungeon master or the game developers pose hypothetical questions to the players, and the players can have an input about how those questions get answered. So all of this clearly is very abstract and hypothetical, but the things that make these things a bit more concrete are things like the game system and the character sheet, which interacts with the game system. In like Dungeons and Dragons and similar dungeon crawler types of games, you mostly have dice and maybe a few modifiers to interface with the world with. You have procedures that you follow to interface with the abstract milieu of the world that the dungeon master has come up with. And how do you know what kind of capabilities your character has in the face of these hypothetical questions in the milieu? Well, this is where the character sheet comes into play, and I think almost any game has a character sheet system. At least any game that I would play. I know that there are some story games out there that would probably just like, well, say something and it'll work. You know, I really like having the character sheet though. It's my bread and butter. We can actually cruise on over to our character sheet here for a while. This is a randomized Oblivion character. You know, I rolled for the race, for the sex, and for the class, although I modified it slightly, and the birth sign. This Lord birth sign has kept this character alive way too long, by the way. She's an Iron Man character, and she has not bit the dust yet at level 24. Anyway, the character sheet contains a ton of biographical data like this. Or, I mean, if you're playing a tabletop role-playing game, it'll have a variable amount of biographical data, just like whatever you want to put into it, really, whatever's relevant for your game. It'll have things like your ability scores or attributes. Uh-oh, looks like that Will-the-Wisp damaged me a little bit. You might have things like a class selection if you're playing a more traditional game, or a series of proficiencies or features or foci if you're playing a game like GURPS. That's a real game, by the way. I'm not just making sounds. You might have your known languages, your spells, your saving throws, or just a myriad of other things that can help contextualize what your character means in the world. So your character sheet is kind of like a framework through which you can participate. I wonder, yeah, she can roll too. I love that. My favorite part of playing Oblivion right here is just doing backflips everywhere. Yeah, your character sheet provides a framework through which you interact with the world. So it begs the question, if all of these things can be found on a character sheet, what is the most important... Oh, found a chest. A lockpick? Yeah, I'll take it. What is the most important part of the character sheet? Well, it really depends on what game you're playing, of course, and your own personal preferences. But in my experience, and according to my subjective preferences, I feel like there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that let's take that too. Your inventory is the most impactful and meaningful part of your character sheet. And I know what you're thinking. You know, y'all out there who play Pathfinder or 3.5 or D&D 5e are thinking, no, the ability scores, your skills are the most important part of your character. And like, that's fine, but for the games I play, it's like the inventory is really what shapes the way you as the player interface with your character, and it shapes the way that your character interfaces with the world around them. And it does this in many ways, and heard someone's weapon being drawn. We're going to discuss mostly how your inventory can help provide... Oh, I still have the arrows of silencing. That's a little bit excessive. Oops. Let's take the meat from the boar. Yeah, we're going to talk about how character sheets can provide characterization. This is a female guard. Look at her go. You go, girl. Okay. Keep knocking them down. I love having a high-level archer in Oblivion, or marksman. Yeah, your inventory can provide a shocking amount of characterization, or an unexpected amount of characterization. It can also provide a sense of character progression, in a sense that is a little bit obvious, but I still want to talk about. And it also provides just a meaningful way for you to understand what resources are at your disposal, and allows you to kind of tilt the odds in your favor using those resources. So to kick things off, let's talk about how your inventory can provide meaningful characterization in your role-playing experience. You might think of inventory and like the gear that you're wearing as only like sort of set dressing. It only adds like, or maybe you see it as only practical. I don't know which camp you're in. I think it serves the practical purpose of doing things like buffing your armor, your damage resistance, your evasion, things like this, as well as just providing some interesting flavor to your character. So inventory kind of does it all on that front. For example, I can't help but think about this time whenever I started viewing myself as an adventurer, whenever I was doing IT support in a suburb, or kind of in the Denver area in all of its various suburbs. And I would go to do one specific thing, like fix a monitor at one of my company's retail locations. I'd go there with like an HDMI cord and a display cord, like whatever I might need for the job, I thought. And I would find out that this old janky ass monitor uses only VGA, and it only outputs to the computer it's connected to only outputs to HDMI or DisplayPort, and so I'm not able to finish the job that day. I don't have the right equipment with me, and I'd get like really frustrated and have to like waste gas and time on that failed excursion. And then I would do that a separate time and run into similar issues, and I just got so fed up with like not having the right inventory on my character sheet that I eventually started using this old bag that I found in my office. I crammed it full of all sorts of cables that I could find, anything that I could need in my line of work, along with an electronics repair kit that I had gotten for like Christmas or my birthday or something. And I just started carrying around what I called the arsenal. It was all of my possibles. There's this bit in Blood Meridian, this book by Cormac McCarthy, where this guy's like, go pack up your possibles. He meant like the character's inventory, and like it kind of, I've never seen that word used outside of that, but it makes sense. Get the things that you might possibly need for your arsenal. I had all my possibles with me. I really want to cross the bay or the river without getting in the water. We'll see if I'm able to. But yeah, in addition to this bag full of my inventory, I would consider that. Oh yeah. I would consider that I had a weapon in me, in a sense, because if you've lived in Denver for a while, or at any length in time, you might already know that there is just a super huge prevalence. Having to get a little bit damp. We'll just swim across. There's a prevalence of car theft in the Denver area. I actually fell victim to it one time, but we'll get to that in a second. So I carried around this anti-theft club. It's a thing that you use to brace your steering wheel if you're unfamiliar. I wouldn't say it totally prevents a car from being stolen, but it's a huge deterrent, because like if you put yourself in the shoes of a car thief who managed to hotwire a car and they're about to drive down the road, but there's clearly an anti-theft club on the car you're driving, like that's going to get some police reports very fast, or it's going to make you a target for every cop that drives by. So the fact that this thing is a deterrent is the biggest benefit to having it. But it's kind of like a weapon whenever you think about it. Whenever I think about those situations we find yourselves in where you picture yourself in time of crisis, how would you react? And, well, I would get my metal rod that is kind of in its own little sheath. The Anti-Theft Club makes for a pretty good weapon in a pinch, I'd imagine. In addition to that, I always had a 1-gallon jug of water wherever I went. And so I felt like such an adventurer keeping track of my resources and my inventory between the arsenal, my water supply, and my anti-theft club, which protected my car and, you know, in a sense, might have protected myself. I wouldn't bring the club to a gunfight, of course, but, you know, you probably have those what would I do in crisis situations kinds of thoughts also. But I could imagine that if somebody were to find my car full of those things and not even meet me, they would be able to surmise quite a bit about me just from what they found there. There was actually a time where someone did have the opportunity to think that, because before I had this anti-theft club, my car had been broken into one time. I'm not sure if I just left the door unlocked or something like that, or if they had figured out a way to like get past the lock. But I went to my car one time and found my belongings strewn about everywhere, and like they found things like an old coffee mug that probably should have been taken indoors previously. They found the Akira soundtrack in cassette, like the case for that. You know, they found things like an A$AP Ferg and a Red Hot Chili Peppers CD case, and they just find basically a bunch of bits of my inventory. And they're like, okay, I'm sure that's not what they were thinking at the time, but they certainly could have had a good understanding of who I was, or at least my tastes, just by looking at a few of my pieces of inventory. So we can apply this rationale toward our role-playing as well. If you've played any amount of dungeon delving role-playing games, you'll know that traditionally a fighter is not restricted, but they are allowed to use heavy armor. And clerics are often allowed to use weaponry that is blunt, maybe not bladed, or things like that. And you might wonder, like, what are these restrictions all about? These archetypes that your characters are forced into? And I think this is a kind of chicken and the egg situation here. Because they are technically restrictions, but they are also kind of just like logical conclusions that the player would come to if they were playing that role. A fighter who's on the front lines would simply really advocate for medium armor or heavy armor to absorb as many blows from the enemies as possible. A cleric doesn't feel bummed out because they don't get to wield a sword. They choose not to wield the sword because they would rather find a peaceful resolution, if at all possible. Let's ignore the fact that many D&D systems don't have, implicit rules for peaceful takedowns and things like that. We found a Daedric Shrine. That's pretty neat. All right, let's get out of here. I'm gonna get sidetracked. Yeah, so it's kind of a chicken and the egg situation. Is the wizard forced to wear robes because they the player chose the magic user class, or does the wizard opt to wear robes because that's most befitting of their character who needs a lot of storage space to tuck their components and wants to carry a spell book and things like that? Or maybe it's just an aesthetic choice in the case of the magic user. Yeah, regardless, I think this is a kind of chicken and the egg situation where the class restrictions are not necessarily supposed to feel like restrictions, but instead they are just the natural conclusion of what that character would end up selecting anyway. But other examples of how your inventory can provide characterization. I rambled on about my life a lot. Let's talk about role-playing games for a second. If you've watched the very first video on my channel, you've seen the character Wades and Reeds. He's that's the video, by the way, where I talk about why I love Daggerfall's dungeons so much. Wades and Reeds is this character who, oh wow, look at him, he got knocked down already. Let's see if I can let's just run away from him for a while. I already said that, I love high-level marksman in this game. It's so fun. Yeah, Wades and Reeds. He's this barbarian, he's armorless, he uses a bow and arrow whenever he has to for ranged combat, but mostly he just uses his, scaled fists, and it's fantastic, it's awesome. But what you may not know about him is he is a devout servant of Kinnereth, and this means that everywhere he goes, he keeps his, the land drake that I've killed in a previous adventure. It looks like it. These things are terrifying if you find one walking around. What you might not know is that Wades and Reeds is a devout servant of Kinnereth, so he doesn't really leave his house without a I'm having some weird graphical issues there. I'm going to ignore them. He keeps prayer beads with him. This is what I'm trying to say. I'm getting distracted, but he keeps prayer beads with him at all times. Call it superstition, you call it faith, whatever you want to, but he's religious, so he's always going to have prayer beads with him. On a related note about how your inventory can provide characterization, this relationship is not only additive. Like, you don't just have to keep adding things to your character to like express your characterization using your inventory sheet. Wades and Reeds, he chooses not to wear armor, like, at all. Even though he's a fighter, even though he expects to be on the front lines, he feels much more comfortable without any armor on him. So in this sense, the character sheet, like the absence of these things, help provide characterization. He also doesn't carry weapons besides a bow and arrow, but that's besides the point. If you look at another character like my bandit, I always forget his name. I just call him the bandit repeatedly. He's a very greedy son of a bitch, but there are things that he wants to have instead of money sometimes. For example, whenever he was robbing pawn shops in his youth, he found a bunch of amulets and rings, bracers, marks, and all the other like accessory slots that you have in Daggerfall, and he just like blinged himself out. And if it just makes sense from the perspective of somebody who has aspirations of being a bandit lord. A bandit lord does not look humble. A bandit lord looks super like ostentatious about their wealth. They look over the top, and so whenever you see him on the streets, he's always going to have a few gold necklaces on, because that's what he would do. Even though he could just sell this jewelry and make a few thousand gold off of it, it's put to better use, making a statement by being on his person like that. So yeah, I really love the way that that your inventory sheet can inform characterization like that. We haven't done enough like front flips and back flips and cartwheels and stuff. Go ahead and yeah. Fall damage, we don't care. There we go. I just love exploring the countryside in Oblivion, especially if you have like You might notice I have this HUD off, except for it comes up in the bottom left corner sometimes when my stat bars are low. I also have, like, if you look at the map here, you don't get any help. There's no "you are here" indicator. It's fantastic. Alright, well, there's a future video about that, I'm sure. About how cool navigating these games are without quest markers and compasses. Anyway. So beyond the characterization that your inventory provides, your inventory also helps define the key resources that your character has access to. For example, whenever I was about to fight that will-o'-the-wisp, well, first I wanted to run from it, but whenever I saw that a civilian, was about to fight it, I'm like, okay, let me see if I can help out. So I'm looking around, seeing what resources I have to interact with this character with, and I'm like, okay, the arrows of silence might help. If you've watched my Daggerfall Unity, like, Iron Man playthroughs for any length of time, you'll know that I'm pretty obsessed with keeping a decent amount of potions on me. Like, I want to have enough healing potions, stamina potions, free action, cure disease, cure poison. Like, I want to have a contingency in place for every sort of lethal, like, hazard we might run into. And this is very crucial in games where the threat of death is real, for one. And I should just mention in general that inventory is especially meaningful if the threat of death is a real thing for your character. You know, whenever I used to be a DM in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons games, it was almost like taboo. A character couldn't die, like a player character could not die, unless the player made some sort of stupid, reckless decision. If you were to play out an encounter and someone were to die because of their, like, combat, and their character just happened to roll poorly while the enemies were rolling well, it's almost like a social stigma because people get so attached to their characters. I really want the threat of death to be in my games because of how meaningful and, like, simply titillating, like, how exciting it is whenever you might lose your character and you want so badly to make it out alive, and the stories afterward are so fantastic. And even if your character does end up biting the dust, finding a way to let their death be meaningful is just really it's beautiful. Anyway, oh yeah, one more point. Inventory is going to be especially important if you're tracking carry weight. So if a bag of holding carries everything for you, you're never going to have to make any, like, meaningful decisions about, oh, should I carry this amount of, like, loot, like this heavy gem that I know will sell for a couple thousand gold, or should I carry all these magic weapons that we brought? You know, you're just going to bring all the good things in that case. So inventory is not as important in that situation. Okay, got 4 gold out of that chest. Why not? Anyway, getting back to the task at hand. Your inventory on your character sheet, it describes the things that your character has access to that can help them overcome adversity. And I find this is really pertinent in situations where you suddenly find yourself with a magical item. For example, if you've played any Elder Scrolls game that has a speed stat, you know how crucial the speed stat is. Not only does it increase your movement speed, it also increases your attack speed usually, which therefore increases your DPS. So you're able to bob and weave out of danger more efficiently and more effectively, and you're able to, you know, kill things faster. The speed stat is just broken. It's so good. And so there's a couple of occasions where I've found an item like a shirt in Daggerfall that will increase my speed. It'll buff it from maybe like 60 or 65 all the way up to the high 90s or 100, depending on what I roll in that situation. And in Daggerfall, there's durability for these things. Instead of just having a magic effect that lasts interminably, you know, you can just wear it as much as you want on this shirt if you were to wear it in Oblivion. Or instead of using like a sort of rechargeable charge system, as you see in Morrowind and Oblivion, the items you use in Daggerfall, they will perish. You can repair some things in the base game. I usually choose not to unless the situation hasn't come up yet. But the point is, I really like that the things that you wear that are magical, that get depleted every time you wear them for a certain amount of time, every time you equip them, every time you travel with them, You can't count on those forever. And this means you're making a very meaningful decision every time I put on that like shirt of Notorogo or Notorgo, whatever it's called, that increases my speed. Whenever I was playing my bandit character and I found a magical item like that, I had to think carefully anytime I wanted to wear that item because, you know, it's such a precious resource. I was trying to complete the main quest, and so every time I equipped that item that would increase my speed, it was one fewer time that that item could be equipped, and I want that item to last as long as it can, you know? So it's like if you're fighting, for example, just like a couple of imps and you're a sort of mid to high level character, you don't feel super threatened. You're like, okay, I think I can get by without equipping that item. But then you run the risk of underestimating the threat of the dungeon around you, and maybe you get overwhelmed because you did not equip the item. And once you have the item equipped, you're kind of set for a while. It will dock the durability later on if you wear it for too long, but typically... Oh yeah, I forgot I have a healing spell. This is part of what makes... Normally I wouldn't use restoration on a character like this because she's just a warrior. But this is part of the birth sign, so it's more like an innate ability than spell casting. Ah, dang. Lost my train of thought for a second. Yeah, the fact that those items might disappear makes the decision to wear them much, much more meaningful and interesting. It makes the whole gameplay experience more interesting. I'm not sure that I would have finished the game with that character if it weren't for a helmet of friendship that I found somewhere near the end game. This helmet of friendship boosted my innate personality up to 100, and this meant that in the final dungeon, where you have Fire Daedra hurling powerful fire spells at you and Daedra Lords casting spells at you, they could like kill me so easily, even with my huge HP pool. I ended up pacifying a lot of them and not having to worry about running from them or fighting them because of my Helm of Friendship. You know, these little resources that you get as the player make the game so much more interesting, makes it so much more appealing. You have a lot more like meaningful choices essentially because of what's happening on your character sheet. Wonder if there... Oh yeah. Another really cool magical item that's in Oblivion is the Boots of Spring-Heeled Jack. Have y'all played the Thieves Guild? I hope you've played the Thieves Guild in Oblivion by now. Eventually you find these shoots that buff your acrobatic skill a ridiculous amount, and this just totally changes the way that you interface with the game. You know, instead of running on foot or thinking about how you can fight your way through a dicey encounter, because if you're a thief, you presumably are not super good at fighting. Stealth archery is good in this game, but not as good as it is in like Skyrim. So now with the Boots of Spring-Heeled Jack, you don't have to worry so much about how you're going to handle enemies whenever you find them. You can just jump over them. And I just love the way that the resources that you find help to change the way that you interface with the game. My game might be crashing. Okay, we're here. Cool. Let me do a little quick save. But that doesn't have to be just magical items. If you roll up your certain amount of like silver pieces or gold pieces whenever you're starting your character in like any tabletop role-playing game, you'll have the option to buy things like chalk or pythons or what are those things called that are like spikes that you throw on the ground? I'm drawing a blank right now. Or just like a bag of marbles. And I love picking these things up because they are inexpensive and they give you a sort of crafty element of how to interface with the challenges that you'll find. Or a flask of oil. Man, are you going to make that into a Molotov cocktail? Or are you trying to escape an enemy and make the floor slick behind you so that your enemies slip and fall in pursuit? You know what I mean? Like, they don't have to be magical items. The things that you just put on your character sheet can totally change the way that you... this little stand-in agent for the player that we call the character totally changes the way that they interface with the world around them and the challenges that it presents. Oh, I see that my little... I kind of wish that this glowing eyeball wasn't a thing. I don't want to know if I'm detected. Little tangent right here. There's a lot of bits in older editions of Dungeons & Dragons that mention that players should not roll stealth checks. The DM should do that because a thief who is being sneaky, or trying to be, they're always going to assume that they are being successful, and it's much more scary whenever you are found out if you don't know that you're being found out. You know what I mean? I wish this little indicator of how detected you are were not a thing. Maybe the system in the Thief games where it shows how much brightness is on you would be a better system. But obviously a game focused on stealth is better about stealth things. I shouldn't get too caught in the weeds about stealth systems and stuff like that. But to wrap up this conversation about the importance of character sheets and magical items and how they change the way you interact with the game, think about the sigil stones that you find in Oblivion. I usually don't activate the main quest in Oblivion because I just think it's an eyesore seeing an Oblivion gate on every other street corner. Oh shit, I thought that was a guard. Why is he hitting me? Man, I love Oblivion. It is so funny. Just complete ragdoll physics from one arrow hitting him. That's so hilarious. Okay. Yeah, you might already know this. Those who haven't played Oblivion, though, basically Oblivion gates show up. These are little bridges between the Oblivion plane and Nirn, the planet that we are on. And to seal off these gates, you infiltrate the Oblivion plane, you go into the gate, and you find what's called a sigil stone, which is kind of like this little sphere that is it's letting all these machinations activate to allow this bridge between dimensions. So you pick up the sphere that's called a sigil stone, and the gate shuts, and you are popped out back on Nirn outside of the Oblivion gate. You know, crisis averted sort of thing. But you get this item that you can use to either enchant an artifact. I'm sorry, not an artifact. You can either enchant a weapon or a piece of armor. I don't know what's going on here. Y'all seeing this? Okay. I think this place is overrun by goblins, but my interior lighting mod still is picking up its windows and seeing his lights. It's kind of weird. Yeah, let's just move on our way and ignore it like we do with glitches. I don't fix mods, I just ignore them. Anyway, I used to be told by random users online and stuff like that if you find a sigil stone, like, you should always save before you pick up the sigil stone, right? Because the sigil stone's magical effects are randomized whenever you pick it up. And so if you get a sigil stone that you don't like, you can just reload it and try it again. Or better yet, why don't you just wait until you're level 21 whenever the sigil stone's magical effects are scaled to your level. So this is whenever you'll get the strongest. Please don't be. This is a mountain lion. Okay, nobody panic. Stay calm. It's a mountain lion. Stay calm. I don't think there's a more threatening animal in video games between the mountain lion in Oblivion and like Red Dead Redemption. I just don't know of a more terrifying creature. Like, I'm a pretty high level character, so it's not that bad, but typically this is just like, okay, I'm rolling a new character soon. Yeah, you'd get advice to wait until you're level 21. You'd get advice to save scum to get the right magical effect. But maybe you should just give the magical effect that you end up with a try and see how it changes your gameplay experience. And regarding waiting until like level 21, like, you can delay the gratification of getting that. One, I would use a mod that removes level scaling, because it's bad for video games to do that. I hate that in video games. So you can use a mod to circumvent that, but even without it, you're missing out on the benefit of that magical item. If you get a sigil stone at level 5, you're going to spend 16 levels of gameplay without that magical effect. And it's not like those sigil stones are going anywhere. Take your time completing the main quest, and you'll have an abundance of them to choose from. So yeah, I just like using resources. I know that whenever we're playing role-playing games, we have this tendency and this belief that we should hoard them, and like, don't use your resources because whatever situation you're in now cannot be as dire as the one in 2 hours, or like, you know, later on in your character's life that could be more dire. No, man, get the immediate benefit from it. If you're another person who's like happens to be a huge fan of both Elder Scrolls and Fire Emblem, you might have already found a channel called oh, where's my campsite? I thought I set it up, but you might have already found the channel run by Mecha. He has a video called Hoarding is a Pitfall. Basically, in Fire Emblem, you have all these very helpful items, and yeah, if you... Oh, here it is. Yeah, let's go and sit inside our tent for a while. This is one of my favorite mods, by the way. I could say that about a ton of my mods, but yeah, let's relax in here for a bit. Anyway, hoarding is a pitfall. You get items, you get magical items, you should use them instead of like waiting for the next best time to use them, because by not using them, you're making the play experience a little bit worse for yourself. I'm not saying you should use them all recklessly, but the game developers gave you those resources to use them because you need them, you know? It also, using your resources invites a very special version of gameplay, or what am I trying to say? A feature in gameplay that I admire a lot, known as, I guess you could call it like resource depletion. If you've seen my Daggerfall play, Let's Play videos with Kirstia, you'll know that this character was really, really poor, and everywhere I went, it was a struggle to bring the right amount of potions and provisions to feel safe. And it's like every time I got into a situation where I would fight a spider or a ghost and end up paralyzed, not only do I have to use a potion of free action, I am like 500 gold further away from paying off the loan that I took to buy a horse because I had to use the potion of free action. And so it makes me like it makes me more selective about the challenges I take on in that situation. And yeah, I just love allowing resource depletion to be a real threat in the games I play, instead of completely mitigating that version of a game's features by save scumming or hoarding the items. Yeah, that's my take about how inventory provides so many interesting ways for your character to interface with the world around them. So another facet. Let's go ahead and like take a little nap here before getting into the last chapter of our discussion here. But yeah, another facet of how inventory is super crucial, the most important part of your character sheet, in my opinion, is the way it provides character progression. I forgot to eat dinner. Let's see if I can... Let's eat a little bit of boar meat, bread. Eat enough for last night as well. Eat a Danger Heart, sure. Not really, but lettuce and potato will do it. Okay. Go ahead and pack up our camp. Hope I still remember how to do this. Yeah, okay. Yep. So to talk about how your inventory provides character progression, obviously you level up, you get new gear, you move on. It's pretty cool. I want to talk about my only Dovahkiin though. I usually, whenever I play Skyrim, I really don't like the trope of being the chosen one, so I don't usually play as a Dovahkiin. There was one character named Flynn Borison. This was back whenever I bought the game for, I don't know, maybe the 4th time, for the different consoles I played it on, and this one was for the PS4. Yeah, Flynn Borison was a retired old Nord who came out of retirement to help out with the Civil War, and ended up finding out that he's the Dovahkiin and does this and that. But he's a really talented smith, he's a really talented hunter, and so he made a vow that he would basically only ever equip and use armor and weaponry that he created. And so, wow, what happened here? Absolute bloodbath. Imperial Legion guards are down. Mountain Lion must have taken a couple of them out before finally meeting its end. That's pretty brutal. I've probably been here before, by the way. It's been probably literally a year since I played this character, but I love her, so I return to her sometimes. Anyway, Flynn Borison would always have the kind of mediocre armor, because the armor and weapons that I would find on enemies would often be a little bit better than what he's using, but he's very devout about how his handiwork is what's more trustworthy than what the enemies are wearing. He doesn't want to wear armor that's been tainted by the blood of the ruthless bandits that he's cutting down and things like that. And so this made the character progression very meaningful, as he would get his first special upgrade whenever he went from using leather armor to scaled armor. And eventually, as he progressed in the story, he was hunting dragons. He honestly stopped doing the main quest for a while and just became a dragon hunter. And that was a character arc I was looking forward to a lot. And so, watching him change over time from this old man and just like leather rags to this grizzled warrior wearing dragon bone armor was just really, really fantastic to see. So this is a kind of an example of how character progression and characterization can be facilitated just by your inventory. There are certain games like Diablo 2 that use your character sheet and your inventory as almost like the only form of progression. Like, sure, in Diablo 2 you use energy stat to get more mana, you use the vitality stat to get more health, But your dexterity and strength stats, they don't really do anything besides allow you to wear the armor that you want to use and the weapons that you want to use. I'm sure there are some like benefits to it besides that, but this is the primary reason of it. By the way, if you ever want to play Diablo 2 in 2024 or onward, please play Project Diablo 2 and not Diablo 2 Resurrected. It does not have the graphical enhancements of Diablo 2 Resurrected. I don't really care for those, as you can probably tell by my Oblivion mod layout. But it rebalances all the class archetypes so that every archetype is viable, and it adds a lot of late game content that just makes the game so replayable and awesome. It's like my favorite way of bonding with my siblings is just playing some Project Diablo 2. So yeah, go Google it and install it if you want to play Diablo 2 in a modern era. Anyway, this video isn't about Diablo 2, it's about role-playing games, dang it. Yeah, but like the magical item discussion we had previously, the progression that you find in games often comes from better weapons that you find in addition to like increasing your stat numbers and things like that. And whenever you're playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons that uses a base D20 system, a sword that gives you +1 to hit, or maybe like +1 to hit and then +3 to hit undead, it curbs your chances just by like 5% or 15%. And that small margin of like extra success could be what saves your life that day. Anyone that has played Fire Emblem like in an Iron Man fashion knows how important just a few percentage points can be for your survival. So those bits of like armor upgrades and weapon upgrades, they are the dividing line between life and death sometimes, which is why there's like a smith in Oblivion that uses the dividing line as its name, I guess. Yeah, let's see. A last point to round out this discussion about the way progression and your inventory play a role with one another is to talk about loot as experience. I discussed this briefly in my video about Daggerfall's dungeons, but in many older editions of Dungeons & Dragons, such as the Basic and Expert set, or Basic Fantasy RPG and games like this, what you might call retro clones, the experience you get is not determined by the amount of quests you complete or the amount of monsters you kill. Granted, those things can grant experience, but the primary way that you get experience is by carrying out loot. So, you know, you might get one piece of experience for one piece of silver or one piece of gold, depending on the standard in your game, and you'll get like maybe 5 experience for killing a goblin. So by fighting a goblin, you are putting yourself in harm's way whenever you could just be like searching for the most efficient way to gather treasure to level up. You know, it really incentivizes you to calculate every risk before you take it, and to think through your decisions in a way that is not always just go through, kill the things, go through, kill the things, go through, kill the things. And this is why I mentioned earlier that inventory will be especially meaningful if carry weight is a consideration, because you might find something that is expensive and heavy, like a, I don't know, let's say an ebony warhammer, or you can find something that is expensive and lightweight, like a holy dagger. And ideally, you carry both of those things out of the dungeon. But if you can find several holy daggers, you might just end up leaving the ebony warhammer behind because, well, this will get you the gold that you need to level up regardless. Yeah, I really love loot as experience, and hoping to find more time on my schedule to play tabletop role-playing games just to get this... get the let out, so to speak, regarding these systems that I adore so much that aren't really catered to in video games. Yeah, so tying character progression to the amount of loot acquired is another way to make important decision points focused around your character's inventory. Whenever you leave the dungeon, your character sheet is a reflection of things like your ambition, your fortune, and your greed. I just love the way that your inventory... it provides so much depth to your character and to the roleplay experience that you might not really, I wouldn't say you take for granted, but you might not consciously realize how much of the work in your role-playing game is being done by your character sheet. Hey guys, did y'all know that Oblivion is a beautiful game? My goodness, I simply love it. Again, I don't replay it on repeat like Daggerfall, but look at this, man. I just can't help coming back to this area and like listening to the music and enjoying the sights and stuff like that. Anyway, the next time that you're rolling up a character and you do the thing where you roll for the amount of your starting gold, think about what kind of things you can add to your character sheet that aren't just, you know, weapons and armor, that could add flavor to your character, that can add more resources to your disposal as the character. Oh, caltrops. Those are the spike things that I couldn't think of the word of earlier. Yeah, buy some caltrops, some marbles, and some pythons. Buy some iron spikes so that whenever you're fleeing from enemies, you can jam the door shut, or feel safe resting in a dungeon at night by jamming the door shut, that sort of thing. You know, your inventory just gives you so many options for characterization and like these kind of subtle power boosts that you can get by having more decisions at your disposal. All right, so that's my ramble about how important inventory is on your character sheet. So this is all highly subjective, obviously, so I'd like to hear what you believe is the most important, or at least the most satisfying for you, the player, to fill out on your character sheet. Do you enjoy picking out spells? Do you enjoy rolling to see what spells you get? Do you find a lot of satisfaction choosing the languages? Or are you a background author who likes to, you know, spend a couple hours hammering out your character's backstory? Let me know in the comments, because my favorite part about producing these videos is the discussions that we have. A little bit of fall damage. The discussions that we have that follow the videos. So thanks so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share with your homies who might be into my autistic ramblings. Alright, take care everyone. Hiya.